It all started on a Wednesday afternoon. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the trees, and the streets were quiet as my mother-in-law and I walked slowly toward our favorite little cafe in the town we had just moved to. My mother-in-law, Clara, had always been a quiet woman, a little reserved, but full of small gestures of kindness that no one ever really noticed until you needed her. She had raised my husband alone for most of his childhood, and had a heart that could not say no when someone asked for help. I had come to love her in a way that was different from a mother or grandmother. She was someone whose presence made life feel steadier somehow, even when everything felt like it was slipping out of control. That day we had decided to treat ourselves. It was one of those rare afternoons where nothing urgent was waiting at home, and the thought of warm bread and coffee felt like a luxury. The cafe was small but cozy, tucked between a bookstore and a florist shop, and the smell of fresh baked pastries made your chest feel tight with comfort. Clara always loved this place because it reminded her of when my husband was a little boy. She would tell me stories about how he would hide under the tables just to watch the barista froth milk into perfect little hearts. We sat down at our favorite corner table, the one by the window where the sun caught the steam from the coffee just right. I ordered a sandwich and she asked for a salad, and for a moment everything felt perfect. We talked about small things the way you do when you feel safe with someone. We laughed about a cat that had wandered into the bookstore next door, and I could see the lines on her face soften. She looked younger somehow when she laughed, and I thought maybe life had given her a little break for once. When the food arrived, I realized I had forgotten my wallet at home. I laughed, hoping to make it seem like no big deal. Clara reached into her purse and pulled out her cards. She handed them to me with that quiet smile she always wore, the one that made you feel like nothing in the world could go wrong as long as she was there. I swiped the card for the first time and it was declined. My heart skipped a beat. I tried again, declined. Then I handed her card back and she tried, declined. She tried again, declined. And then I felt something heavy press against my chest. Every card we had with us was blocked. Every card. The realization hit like a wave and I froze for a moment, unsure what to do next. We sat there staring at each other, our food in front of us, hot and smelling delicious, and neither of us could pay for it. Clara put her hand on mine, her fingers warm and steady. She said, "Well, I guess we can't let a little thing like money ruin lunch." Her voice was calm, but I could hear the worry beneath it. I wanted to cry because it wasn't just lunch. It was everything. The blocked cards meant bills unpaid, calls from the bank, and a reminder that life could change in an instant. She had lived through so many hardships. I had thought she had seen everything, but even she looked a little shaken now. I looked around the cafe and saw the barista waiting patiently, a young man with a friendly smile who probably had no idea what it meant to have nothing to pay for your lunch. I felt a pang of embarrassment. I imagined all the eyes turning toward us, judging us, thinking we were careless or foolish. Clara squeezed my hand and whispered, "We'll figure this out. Don't worry about what anyone thinks." There was something about her courage in that moment that made my chest tighten again. She was afraid too, but she refused to let fear take over. We left the cafe with the boxes of uneaten food, walking slowly down the street, our shoes echoing against the pavement. Clara told me stories from her past to distract me. She spoke about the time she had lost her job unexpectedly, and how she had gone weeks without enough money to buy groceries. She had walked the streets at night praying someone would notice her, and somehow, someway, things had worked out. "Life has a funny way of testing you," she said softly, "but the only way you fail is if you give up." Her words stuck to me like glue. Even in this small, humiliating moment, she somehow made me feel strong. That night at home, we called the bank. After long minutes on hold and repeating the same information over and over, we learned there had been a security issue, a suspicious transaction that triggered the automatic blocking of all our cards. It was embarrassing, frustrating, and exhausting, but hearing the explanation made us feel a little better. We knew it wasn't our fault. We knew life hadn't failed us entirely. But what stayed with me was how Clara handled it. She did not panic. She did not blame anyone. She just looked at me and said, "We'll eat better tomorrow. We'll figure it out." The courage it took for her to smile, to carry herself through that day, was something I would carry with me forever. It reminded me that bravery is not always about grand gestures. Sometimes it is about staying calm when the world seems to be closing in, about finding kindness in a moment that could so easily be filled with shame. That night I thought about all the women like Clara, women who hold families together, who fight silent battles with bills and fear and uncertainty, who smile when no one is watching, and whose courage often goes unnoticed. And that was the beginning of a journey I had not expected. A journey that would teach me more about resilience, love, and the quiet power of ordinary courage than any book or speech ever could. We didn't just survive that day. We learned how to face life's little catastrophes with grace, and looking back, I realized it was not about the blocked cards at all. It was about the strength we find in ourselves when everything we rely on falls apart. The next morning we woke up early, though neither of us slept particularly well. My mind kept replaying the previous day, the quiet panic of sitting at that cafe unable to pay, the embarrassment I thought I would never shake. Clara, however, seemed surprisingly calm. She moved around the kitchen like she always did, humming softly as she poured coffee and buttered bread. She had this quiet rhythm that made the house feel alive even when the world outside seemed uncertain. I watched her from the doorway, feeling a mixture of admiration and guilt, wishing I could have even a fraction of her steadiness. We sat down at the small kitchen table and made a plan. I didn't realize until that morning how much courage it takes to face problems without panicking. Clara made lists of what bills needed attention, which accounts had to be contacted, and which errands could wait. She had always been organized, meticulous even, and somehow she made it all feel manageable. I tried to help, but mostly I felt useless. She looked at me and said, "Honey, sometimes just being here is enough. Don't discount the little things you do." After breakfast, we set out to sort the bank issue in person. Driving through town, I noticed the small details I had never really paid attention to before. The old bakery with its chipped paint and fresh pies in the window, the florist across from the library with bright orange marigolds in pots, the young boy on a bicycle waving to his grandmother. It was easy to feel anxious when you were worried about money or bills, but Clara reminded me that life kept moving no matter how heavy our burdens felt. She had this way of noticing the ordinary beauty in the world, even when things seemed dark. At the bank it took hours, forms, questions, verifications, and waiting in lines that never seemed to move. I could feel my patience thinning, my chest tightening with the frustration of bureaucracy, but Clara was calm as ever. She told stories while we waited, small ones about her childhood in a house much smaller than ours, about how she had learned to stretch $1 until it begged for mercy, and I realized then that her calmness wasn't born from luck. It was born from decades of facing difficulties without giving up, from finding courage when there seemed to be none left. By the afternoon, our cards were finally unblocked. Relief washed over us like a warm blanket. It wasn't just the financial freedom that felt good. It was the sense that we had survived something together, that we had weathered a storm without letting it break us. On the way home, we stopped at a small grocery store. Clara insisted on buying a few treats, a box of her favorite cookies, a small bouquet of daisies for the kitchen table, and a carton of eggs. We have to celebrate the little victories, she said with a smile. That night, as we sat at the kitchen table eating our cookies and sipping tea, Clara shared more stories. She told me about the time she had lost her apartment and had nowhere to go. She had called every friend she knew and ended up sleeping on a friend's couch for weeks, all while keeping her son in school and ensuring he never knew how dire things were. Her voice carried no bitterness, only a quiet pride in what she had overcome. I felt tears prick my eyes. How could one person hold so much strength and still give so much love? In the days that followed, I noticed myself changing. I started looking at challenges differently, remembering Clara's words, remembering how she handled our little crisis with such grace. Courage, I realized, wasn't about never being afraid. It was about facing fear and moving forward anyway. Kindness wasn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes it was just about sitting with someone when they were scared, holding their hand and reminding them that they weren't alone. Clara and I went about our routines with a renewed sense of determination. I noticed the neighbors differently now, offering a smile here, a small word of encouragement there. I began volunteering at the local community center, something I had never thought I had time for. Clara, of course, joined me. She had a way of making everyone feel valued, even the quiet ones, the ones who believed they didn't matter. Watching her give so freely made me want to give more. Then came a day that tested our patience and courage again. A small leak had appeared under the kitchen sink. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was enough to make a mess and require immediate attention. Normally, I might have panicked, thinking about the cost of repairs, the inconvenience, the disruption. But Clara simply smiled, rolled up her sleeves, and began figuring out a solution. She called a plumber for advice, patched the worst of the leak herself, and even managed to keep the kitchen tidy while we waited for professional help. It was almost like watching a conductor lead an orchestra. Every action deliberate, calm and steady, yet full of grace and quiet determination. I realized that life was full of small crises, and each one carried its own lesson. Some were frustrating, some embarrassing, and some terrifying, but with patience and courage we could face them. More importantly, I realized that the way we faced these crises mattered more than the crises themselves. Clara had taught me that. Her courage was not loud or flashy. It didn't need validation or applause. It simply existed, steady as the morning sun, guiding those around her through the storms of life. And in that quiet, unremarkable kitchen, with the smell of tea and cookies in the air, I understood something profound. True strength is not always about heroics or grand achievements. It is about showing up, about facing fear with dignity, about loving without condition, and about holding on when everything feels uncertain. That was the gift Clara had given me. And I knew in the deepest part of my heart that her lessons would stay with me for the rest of my life. A few weeks later, life began to feel like it was settling into a rhythm again, though I knew better than to think things were ever truly predictable. Clara and I were slowly catching up on bills, organizing our home, and finding small joys in our daily routines. But life has a way of testing you even when you think you've gained solid ground. One morning, as I was walking to the mailbox, I noticed a neighbor struggling to carry a heavy bag of groceries. She was older, her back slightly bent, and her face twisted with effort. Without thinking, I rushed over and offered to help. Clara had taught me that courage and kindness were inseparable. You couldn't really have one without the other. The woman smiled, her eyes watery with gratitude, and together we managed to carry the groceries into her kitchen. She insisted on offering me a cup of tea, though I told her it wasn't necessary. Still, we sat and talked, sharing stories about our families, our lives, the small victories and struggles. It struck me how much we all carry quietly within us, how many people go through hardships silently, hoping no one notices. That day I realized that help and kindness are never one-sided. The moment you offer them, you receive something equally valuable in return. A sense of connection, a reminder that no one truly faces life alone. Clara noticed the change in me too. One evening, as we were folding laundry together, she said softly, "I see it in you. The way you notice people, the way you stop and help. That is real courage, honey. Not the kind the world shouts about, but the kind that changes lives quietly." I felt a warmth spread through me at her words, a mix of pride and humility. It wasn't about being a hero or doing something extraordinary. It was about showing up, being present, and choosing to act with kindness even when it felt inconvenient or hard. Around this time, we met Mrs. Linton, an elderly woman who lived a few houses down. She was widowed and had recently been hospitalized. Her son lived across the country and could only visit once in a while. Clara, ever the natural caretaker, offered to help with meals and small chores. I joined her, eager to learn from her example. At first, Mrs. Linton was hesitant, embarrassed by the help, but over time she began to open up. She shared stories from her youth about how she and her husband had built their home from scratch, about the struggles they faced raising children during difficult times. Each story was a reminder that life was rarely easy, but it was always worth living fully and with heart. One afternoon, as Clara helped Mrs. Linton rearrange her garden, I noticed the determination in her movements. She didn't complain about aches or fatigue. She simply focused on what needed to be done, one task at a time, with patience and precision. I realized then that courage wasn't only facing big crises. It was about showing up every day, about offering your hands, your heart, and your time to those who needed it. That quiet consistency was more powerful than any dramatic act of bravery. As the weeks went by, our small circle of neighbors grew closer. We shared meals, helped each other with errands, and celebrated birthdays and milestones together. Clara became a quiet anchor in this little community, the person everyone could turn to when life became overwhelming. Watching her, I understood that real strength was not measured in wealth, fame, or recognition. It was measured in the lives you touched, the hands you held, the courage you passed on without even realizing it. One evening, after helping Mrs. Linton organize her pantry, Clara and I walked home in silence. The sky was painted in soft hues of pink and gold. I thought about how far we had come in just a few weeks, from blocked cards and uncertainty to small acts of community, to connections that reminded us of the goodness in the world. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for Clara, for her guidance, and for the lessons she imparted without fanfare. She had shown me that even ordinary people could be extraordinary in the ways that truly mattered. Later that night, I reflected on my journey so far. Courage and kindness were not abstract ideas anymore. They were tangible, lived experiences. Every person we helped, every gesture of care we gave or received, was a thread in a larger tapestry of humanity. And through it all, Clara's unwavering spirit was the pattern I could follow, a roadmap of quiet bravery, resilience, and love. A few days later, as Clara and I sat in the living room sipping our evening tea, I noticed a stack of old photographs on the shelf. They were faded and worn, edges curled from time, but they seemed to hold entire lifetimes within them. Clara picked one up, a picture of a young woman standing proudly in front of a small house, a baby in her arms, and a worn suitcase at her feet. I realized with a start that it was her, long before life had hardened her face with worry and responsibility. She smiled softly, almost wistfully, and began to tell me the story behind the photograph. She had been just 19, newly married, and expecting her first child. Her husband had left shortly after the birth, unable or unwilling to shoulder the responsibilities of family life. Clara had been forced to build a life from scratch alone, with nothing but determination and love to guide her. She had worked multiple jobs, often going without so her son could have enough. She spoke of nights spent on the floor of a tiny apartment, rocking her child to sleep, wiping away tears that were not just her son's but her own, whispering promises she was not sure she could keep. As she spoke, I realized how much of her courage was born out of necessity. Every day had been a choice, stay down or rise again. She had chosen to rise not for herself, but for someone else. The sacrifices she had made were quiet, invisible to the world, but they had built the foundation of our lives today. Listening to her, I felt an overwhelming mix of awe and humility. I had never truly considered what it took for her to keep moving forward, to face hardship with dignity, to love without complaint. She paused and looked at me, her eyes steady and warm. "Life is going to challenge you in ways you don't expect," she said. "Sometimes it will feel impossible, like you have nothing left to give. But even when you are tired, even when the world seems against you, there is always something you can do. A kind word, a helping hand, a smile that someone didn't know they needed. That is what makes life meaningful." I sat there, letting her words sink in. It was more than advice. It was a living example of how to navigate life with grace. Clara had not only survived her hardships, she had thrived in spite of them. She had turned struggle into a source of strength, and love into a tool of resilience. Every story she told, every memory she shared, was a lesson in courage. That evening, I found myself reflecting on my own life in ways I hadn't before. My fears and anxieties seemed smaller, more manageable, when I measured them against the battles Clara had fought quietly for decades. The blocked cards, the minor embarrassments, the small crises of everyday life, they were no longer insurmountable. They were challenges to meet with patience, perseverance, and kindness. In the days that followed, I began to see Clara's lessons in action everywhere. When a young mother struggled with a stroller on the sidewalk, I remembered Clara's hands steadying mine and instinctively offered help. When a coworker faced a personal crisis, I found myself sitting quietly beside them, listening, offering support without needing to solve the problem. Her teachings had become a part of me, a lens through which I now viewed the world. One afternoon, Clara shared another memory, this one from her son's teenage years. There had been a time when her son had made a series of mistakes, poor choices that could have led him down a dangerous path. She had stayed by his side, not judging or punishing, but guiding with patience and unwavering faith. She had taught him the value of responsibility, the importance of integrity, and most importantly, that love does not vanish even in the face of disappointment. Her quiet resilience had shaped the man my husband had become, and through him, it shaped our family. I realized then that courage is rarely about grand heroic acts. True courage is found in persistence, in unwavering commitment to do what is right even when it is difficult, in showing love when the world seems to demand hate. Clara had lived this courage every day, often unnoticed, often uncelebrated, yet it had left a lasting mark on everyone around her. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the lessons Clara had taught me, but for her example, her life, and her unwavering spirit. I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I had a guide, a role model, and a source of inspiration that I could carry with me forever. And I also knew that it was now my turn to live courageously, to face life's hardships with patience, kindness, and quiet strength, just as she had done all these years. As spring slowly unfolded, I began to notice a change in myself. The lessons Clara had shared, the stories of her courage, were no longer just words I heard. They had become part of how I saw the world, how I approached each day. I found myself tackling challenges with a steadiness I hadn't known I possessed. Even the small irritations, the clogged sink, the misfiled bills, the errands that seemed endless, felt more manageable. It wasn't that life had become easier, but I had become stronger, more patient, and more compassionate. One morning, I received a call from work that shook me. A major project I had been leading had encountered serious problems. Mistakes had been made, deadlines were at risk, and the pressure was overwhelming. My first instinct was panic, a familiar tightening in my chest that told me I couldn't handle it. But then I remembered Clara's words. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about acting in spite of fear. I took a deep breath and began to organize, delegating tasks, calling colleagues, and facing each problem one step at a time. Clara noticed my tension when I returned home that evening. She didn't ask for details or tell me to calm down. She simply poured us each a cup of tea, sat with me, and said quietly, "You've got this. One step at a time, honey, that's all you need to do." And somehow her quiet confidence steadied me. I realized that sometimes courage is not about doing things perfectly. It is about moving forward anyway, even when the path is uncertain. Over the next few days, I worked late, made countless phone calls, and faced setbacks that felt discouraging. Yet with every small victory, the emails sent, the meetings scheduled, the problems solved, I felt a sense of empowerment. I began to see that courage was cumulative. Each decision to act despite fear, each effort to stay kind in difficult circumstances, built strength that carried me through the next challenge. At home, Clara continued to be a quiet source of inspiration. She helped me reflect on the choices I was making and reminded me that it wasn't about doing everything perfectly. Life was about showing up, about trying, about refusing to give up when obstacles appeared. One evening, as we folded laundry together, she said softly, "Honey, the world will test you, but never doubt yourself. The strength you need is already inside you." I felt a lump in my throat, grateful for her wisdom and patience, and I realized that I was beginning to believe in myself in a way I hadn't before. During this period, we also encountered small moments of joy that reminded me of life's beauty. Clara insisted we take walks in the neighborhood after dinner, noticing the blooming flowers, the laughter of children playing, and the quiet moments of connection between neighbors. These walks became our ritual, a time to breathe and reflect. She taught me to see courage not just in facing hardship, but also in appreciating life's small, fleeting pleasures, even amidst difficulty. One afternoon, Clara received a call from a friend who had fallen on hard times. Without hesitation, she arranged for groceries to be delivered, checked in on the friend daily, and offered a listening ear. I watched her manage it all without complaint, balancing our household responsibilities with acts of generosity. I realized that courage is not only personal, it is relational. It is the willingness to step beyond your own struggles to help others, to carry a little of their burden, and to make space for kindness even when your own life is complicated. Through these experiences, I began to notice the quiet ways courage and resilience ripple outward. The neighbors we helped became more attentive to each other. Friends and colleagues were inspired by acts of kindness, and slowly the little community around us began to feel more connected. Clara's courage, once private and personal, had become contagious. It reminded me that strength is not only measured by survival, but by how much light you bring into the lives of those around you. By the time the summer came, I felt like a different person. I was more patient, more thoughtful, and more confident. I still faced challenges, both big and small, but I now approached them with a steadiness I hadn't known I could possess. Clara's lessons had transformed me, teaching me that courage and kindness are not fleeting traits, but enduring practices that shape every aspect of life. And so life moved forward, not perfectly, not without struggle, but with a newfound awareness of the strength we carry within us, and the power of compassion to heal, guide, and inspire. I began to understand, more fully than ever, that true courage is quiet, steadfast, and deeply human. As the summer months unfolded, Clara and I found ourselves noticing the small opportunities to make a difference in the lives of others. It started with little things: a neighbor struggling to carry a box of books, a child who had forgotten their lunch at home, an elderly man fumbling with his mailbox. At first, I thought they were just fleeting moments, simple acts that would go unnoticed. But then I realized something profound. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, creates a ripple that touches lives in ways we may never fully see. One afternoon I noticed a young woman sitting alone on a park bench, her head bowed, shoulders tense. Something about her posture told me she was carrying a burden too heavy to be alone. Clara and I approached, offering a simple greeting and a smile. She hesitated, then shared her story: a recent loss, struggles with work, and the feeling of being invisible in the world. We sat with her, listened without judgment, and offered words of encouragement. It wasn't a solution to all her problems, but it was a reminder that someone cared, that she was not entirely alone. That day I understood that courage and kindness often intertwine. To offer kindness when it could be rejected or ignored takes bravery of its own. Clara taught me that moments like these were not just random acts. They were opportunities to practice empathy, patience, and generosity. She reminded me that we don't have to save the world in one day. We just have to do what we can where we are with what we have, and sometimes that is enough to change the course of someone's life. One evening, as we were walking home from the park, a young boy ran up to us, tears streaking his face. His bike chain had broken and he couldn't get home. Clara knelt beside him, examining the chain carefully. She didn't panic or scold. She simply focused on the problem, explained each step patiently, and together we managed to fix the bike. His eyes lit up with gratitude, and he hugged Clara tightly before pedaling away. I watched her, amazed once again at her quiet strength. It was not flashy or dramatic, but it left a lasting impact. That small act of care had created a moment of joy and safety for someone who needed it desperately. Through these small experiences, I began to see how courage could be found in ordinary life. It was in the way Clara faced each day with calm determination, in the way she approached problems without fear, in the way she gave love without expecting anything in return. It was in the way she inspired me to act in ways I might never have thought possible. I realized that courage is not always about grand gestures or heroic deeds. Often it is in the quiet, steady acts of care that ripple outward and change the world in ways that cannot be measured. Clara and I also began volunteering more consistently at the community center. We helped organize food drives, assisted with tutoring programs, and spent hours simply listening to people who needed someone to care. Each interaction reminded me that even small acts of kindness carry immense power. One evening, a woman we had been helping for months brought her child to meet us. She thanked us quietly, tears in her eyes, and told us how much our support had meant. It was humbling to realize that our presence, our patience, our willingness to show up had made a tangible difference. Through all of this, Clara remained a quiet teacher, never seeking recognition or praise. She would often say, "Honey, the world doesn't need us to do everything. It just needs us to do what we can, to be steady, to be kind, and to keep going even when it's hard." And I understood that this was the essence of her courage, the ability to keep moving forward, to give freely, and to face life's challenges with a heart wide open. By the end of the summer, I could feel a shift in myself. I was stronger, more confident, and more aware of the impact of my actions. I noticed how courage and kindness intertwined in ways I had never truly appreciated before. Every act of bravery, every gesture of compassion, no matter how small, contributed to a larger story of human resilience. And I realized that through Clara I had learned a profound truth: the quiet, steadfast courage to show up, to help, and to care is what truly shapes lives and leaves a legacy that cannot be measured. One crisp autumn morning, a challenge arrived that neither Clara nor I could have anticipated. I received a call from work with news that the company was facing a sudden crisis. A major client had withdrawn their contract, and my team was at risk of losing our jobs. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the anxious thoughts racing faster than I could catch them. I looked at Clara, who was quietly sipping her coffee across the kitchen table, and I realized that my instinctive panic could be tempered by what I had learned from her. Courage, I reminded myself, was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. We spent the day making a plan. Clara didn't offer solutions for the corporate world or suggest strategies for a business crisis. She simply sat beside me, listening as I outlined the challenges, asking questions that made me think more clearly. Her presence alone gave me strength. It reminded me that no matter how insurmountable a problem seemed, having someone steady by your side could change everything. By evening, I had drafted a plan to present to management, outlining steps we could take to save the project. It was imperfect, but it was a start, and that was enough. The next morning, I stood before my team and management, nerves jangling, hands slightly trembling. I thought about Clara and her decades of quiet bravery, the way she had faced challenges in her own life without complaint, without fear, and with unwavering determination. I felt her courage infuse me, a quiet strength that steadied my voice and sharpened my focus. I explained the plan, laid out the steps, and spoke honestly about the difficulties ahead. When the room was silent, I held my breath, waiting for judgment. To my relief and surprise, the response was positive. The leadership team appreciated the honesty, the practical approach, and the willingness to take responsibility. My team rallied, offering support and ideas to refine the plan. I realized in that moment that courage is contagious. When one person steps forward with determination and clarity, it inspires others to act, to contribute, and to believe that challenges can be met. That evening, I returned home exhausted but quietly elated. Clara was waiting with a warm cup of tea, and I collapsed into the chair beside her. She smiled knowingly and said, "I knew you could do it. Courage isn't about knowing you'll succeed. It's about showing up anyway." I felt tears prick my eyes as I realized how right she was. That day I had faced fear and uncertainty, not with bravado or confidence, but with steady determination. The same kind of courage Clara had embodied all her life. Over the next few weeks, we navigated the aftermath of the crisis. It wasn't easy. There were late nights, tense meetings, and moments when doubt crept in, but each time I faltered, I remembered Clara's example. Her steadfast courage in the face of years of struggle reminded me that resilience is built over time, not in a single heroic moment. And slowly, step by step, we managed to stabilize the project, earning back the confidence of our leadership and ensuring the security of our team. Amid these professional challenges, Clara continued to teach me the lessons of everyday courage. She cared for neighbors, helped friends in need, and maintained our household with her usual grace and patience. Watching her, I understood that courage is not just about overcoming big crises. It is about living with integrity, kindness, and determination every single day. The ordinary acts, repeated consistently, form a legacy far greater than any one dramatic moment could. Then one day something remarkable happened. The young woman we had met in the park months earlier, the one struggling with loss and fear, came to our door. She was smiling, calmer and confident in a way that had been missing before. She hugged us both and said that our presence, support, and kindness had helped her through a difficult time. I realized then the full impact of the courage and compassion we had shared. It wasn't about recognition or reward. It was about the lives we touched, the hearts we lifted, and the hope we ignited. That night, as Clara and I sat quietly together, I thought about the journey we had traveled. From the day our cards were blocked and we couldn't pay for lunch, to facing professional crises, to helping others in ways I had never imagined, we had learned what true courage meant. It was not loud or flashy. It did not seek praise. It was quiet, steadfast, and deeply human. And most importantly, it was contagious, passing from one life to another, shaping a world that often felt harsh into one that could also be tender, kind, and full of hope. As autumn faded into early winter, I found myself sitting by the window with Clara, watching the first snow gently blanket the neighborhood. The world looked quiet, soft, and peaceful, and for the first time in a long while, I felt fully present. The challenges we had faced, the blocked cards, the small crises, the professional turmoil, were behind us, and yet their lessons lingered. They were etched into me, reminders of the quiet courage that guides us through life when we least expect it. Clara poured herself a cup of tea and handed me one. She smiled, that same steady, knowing smile that had carried me through so many uncertain moments. "You've grown," she said softly, "not because life has been easy, but because you've learned to face it with your heart open." I thought about the journey we had shared, about the countless acts of courage and kindness that had shaped us, and I realized how profoundly she had influenced the way I see the world. Over the weeks, we continued to support those around us. The neighbors, once distant strangers, had become friends. We celebrated birthdays, shared meals, and checked in on one another during times of illness or hardship. The young woman from the park had become a part of this little circle, her confidence and joy a living reminder of the power of compassion. And every day, Clara's quiet example inspired me to act, to show up, and to give more than I thought I could. One afternoon, as we helped Mrs. Linton carry her winter groceries inside, I realized something that brought tears to my eyes. Courage is not always measured in grand gestures or heroic feats. It is measured in the persistence to keep going, the willingness to care when it is inconvenient, and the ability to act with love even when fear or doubt tries to take over. Clara had taught me this without saying it directly. Her life, her choices, her unwavering kindness had been the lesson all along. That evening, as we sat by the fireplace with the soft glow of lamplight warming the room, Clara shared a story from her own childhood that I had never heard before. She had lost someone she loved dearly at a young age, and yet, through grief and fear, she had found a way to move forward, to love again, and to care for others even while her own heart was healing. I understood then that resilience is not a single act but a way of being. It is carried forward, passed from one person to another, shaping lives and leaving a legacy far greater than wealth or recognition could ever achieve. I thought about the day we had been unable to pay for lunch, sitting in that small cafe, unsure what the future held. What had seemed like a minor embarrassment at the time had become a turning point. It taught us patience, humility, and the importance of perseverance. It reminded us that life can change in an instant, and that the way we respond matters far more than the situation itself. From that day forward, I carried the lessons of courage and kindness with me like a compass, guiding every decision, every interaction, and every act of love. As the snow fell outside, I looked at Clara and felt a deep gratitude for her presence in my life. She had shown me that true bravery is quiet, steady, and compassionate. It is the willingness to keep going when life feels heavy, the patience to help others even when it is inconvenient, and the courage to face fear without letting it define you. Through her I had learned not just how to survive, but how to live fully, with heart, with grace, and with an unwavering belief in the goodness that exists in the world. And in that moment, I knew something profound, the courage to face life, to act with kindness, and to love without reservation is the greatest gift we can give ourselves and those around us. It is what turns ordinary people into extraordinary ones. It is what shapes families, communities, and lives in ways that ripple far beyond what we can see. And it is a gift that Clara, in her quiet, steady way, had given me forever. The snow continued to fall, soft and gentle, covering the world in white. And I realized that no matter what storms life may bring, I would carry the lessons of courage, kindness, and love with me always. I would show up, I would care, and I would move forward one steady, brave step at a time. because that is what Clara had taught me, that life is not about the struggles we face, but about how we rise through them, how we lift others, and how we choose to live with heart, courage, and grace every single day.